Hey, welcome back to my channel. I'm Erica and I appreciate you being here. This is going to be a video where I hold myself accountable for some of my past decisions. What I did was make a plan a few months ago for some summer reading, and I don't know that I've done any of the books on my summer reading list, so we're going to attempt to rectify that before summer is at an end, which is quickly coming. Fall is already here, well, almost. The pumpkin spice season is upon us, and I could not be more basic. I've already gotten like 5 pumpkin spice lattes. They had only started, what, a couple weeks ago. I've got a freezer? No, I have a refrigerator full of pumpkin spice creamer for when I make my coffee at home, which I do most mornings. Look, when it comes to pumpkin, okay, I fit every cliche that there is. However, we're not finished with summer quite yet. This is when I am filming this, this is the beginning of September. When you are watching this, it's probably going to be the end of September. So we're going to go on a little journey this month. Hopefully. I'm not going to do all of my books from my summer reading list because with all of my other reading plans for the month and just like real life getting out of the house plans, I just wouldn't have time. However, I've chosen 3 that I think I've got a pretty good chance of getting through, and they're the ones that I've really been meaning to get through the most, so this is going to be my attempt. First one I'm going to do, well, maybe not the first. The first one I'm showing you right now is Daughter of the Pirate King. This is a YA fantasy about the daughter of a pirate king, and she goes on an adventure in the high seas. I've been meaning to read this. I'm obviously obsessed with pirates. Going to finally get through this one. It is YA. I looked at the pages. I'm balancing the other books precariously, don't mind me. I don't think it's gonna take long just because of like the format. Like it is 300 pages, but it's that kind of format, so I'm hoping this won't take very long to read it all. I am going to try to get through Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho. This is a collection of short stories. It's my understanding it's about, well, spirits. So because of the nature of the short stories, I'm hoping this one will also be a pretty fast read, but I really like this author's writing. I thought the most fun part of Blackwater's Sister, which she wrote, the most fun part for me was watching like the spirits and the gods. So I'm hoping this will be a 5-star read. So the last one I'm going to go for is The City of Brass. This is an adult fantasy and it takes place, from what I understand, like primarily in a desert kind of a situation environment. So that was why I chose it for summer reading, and it's been on my radar for a really long time. This one's kind of a chonker, but the layout again doesn't seem too bad. Those are my reading goals for my summer reading. I know it's a much shorter list, I think, that I'm going to end up with. I'm trying to be realistic. I had a really busy summer, so what are you going to do? But I am going to try to get through these. So I'm going to pop back in here as I read through each one, and I'll do a review for all of them that I get through. Fingers crossed, we'll see how far I get with these. So I just finished Daughter of the Pirate King, and I have to say, I found this a very enjoyable little read. This is not intended to be like highbrow, fancy YA book. This is the equivalent of you go to a summer blockbuster movie and you sit there and there's some things that don't make sense, but you know what? There's a lot going on and it's entertaining and you're eating popcorn, and like sometimes that's all that you want. Follow our main character, Alosa, who is the teen daughter of, in fact, the Pirate King. She is also a pirate herself with her own pirate ship and her own crew, and she sails the high seas. This book follows her as she goes on a secret undercover mission for her father, the Pirate King. She's trying to find out where some treasure is, and she's not the only person who wants to know where this treasure is. She gets captured by this rival pirate ship, and it's all part of the master plan. There's a lot of like double crossing throughout this book, both with her and different members of different crews. So that was fun to watch. Our main character is extremely confident, very sure of herself, very sassy. And you know what? It didn't bother me. This author did like the perfect amount of the main character being like super sassy to where it was like, I find it entertaining and not obnoxious because there is a line. There is a line there, and I don't really want to watch a main character that's like so overconfident to the point of like, I can't even root for you because I think that you're just kind of unbearable. Our main character here was not unbearable. She's very sassy, very confident. A lot of it is founded. She does have like a very high level of skill that we see at different points in this book, but it's clear she's also got some insecurities and things that she needs to work through. There might also be a little bit of romance in this book, but it wasn't to the point where I was like irritated by it because I'm not a person that likes a bunch of like, I don't want a romance heavy fantasy. Like, I don't want a fantasy romance. I want a fantasy with some romance. Like, I don't mind if there's a little bit of romance in a book, you know, and this was like just below the line for me. I didn't mind the amount didn't mind the amount that was in this book. I thought it was fine. I also really appreciated that this book didn't seem to take itself too seriously. The way that it was written, it's, you know, it's first person narration, but it kind of feels like reading a diary, like a series of diary entries. This was a super fast read. This was like, what was it? This was like 300 pages, but you can see like there's a lot of spacing here. This was very fast to read. Just the way it was written, it was just a fun little seafaring adventure. Am I biased because I have a thing for pirate story stuff? Maybe kind of, but objectively, I felt like if you just want an entertaining, fast YA kind of like popcorn equivalent, this was fine. My only complaint would be there were parts of this book that felt like they started to get redundant because so much of the book takes place in one spot. Ironically, even though it takes place on a ship, because they're pirates, it felt like it was rehashing some of the same things several times. I felt like maybe we could have gotten to where we needed to go with the characters a little faster, maybe slightly alter the series of events, or at least change up like where it was taking place, because I certainly wasn't bored, but I felt like some of this could have either been condensed or changed just a little bit to not just feel like we're doing the same thing multiple times. Overall, I thought this was really fun for a YA fantasy. It was a super fast, like I said, popcorn read. You're just going on a little pirate adventure. I'm interested enough to read the sequel. I put the sequel, Daughter of the Siren Queen, on my list. I'm probably going to end up borrowing that from the library because I did enjoy this, but I'm like, do I really want to spend like $15 on the sequel? I don't know that I enjoyed it that much. It's kind of like when I go to see just like kind of a mindless movie, I want the entertainment in the moment, but I don't necessarily want to like own that movie, right? This is the same. Very entertaining in the moment, super easy to consume. Do I necessarily want to own the sequel? As of right now, not necessarily, but I definitely want to read the sequel. So it is on my library list, and I can say I successfully crossed out one of my summer reading books. So I finished Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho. This is the second book that I have read by this author. The first one I read was Blackwater Sister, which I really liked. Blackwater Sister was a novel, whereas this is a collection of 19 short stories. Blackwater Sister, my favorite part of that book was seeing the interactions between like the gods and the spirits and the humans. I just really loved it. I thought it was so fun the way the author portrayed that. Even though there was a lot of like difficult or serious things happening in that book, so much of it was portrayed in kind of a lighthearted way. And so I was really hoping that this book would bring in, like, it would just be my favorite parts of Blackwater Sister, which was the spirits and the gods. That's exactly what this book is. I feel like Zen Cho, I feel like you wrote this book just for me, and so I have to say thank you, because these stories, they all follow different characters, so you're not just following the same group throughout the entire series. This is just separate short stories that deal with not just spirits, even though it's called Spirits Abroad. I will say supernatural beings. Each story deals with a supernatural like fantasy element, and they're all based on like Malaysian lore or superstition. I love that this author, with the supernatural beings, one thing that I found pretty consistent, and it was the same in Blackwater Sister, she brings really interesting personality, like unexpected personality, to her supernatural beings in her stories. They're kind of sassy, they're kind of snarky. It's not really what I expect from supernatural beings when I read a book, but she does that pretty consistently when she writes her supernatural elements, and it's something that I continue to enjoy. I thought that it shined even better here because each story is just, it's so focused in, and it's just like a condensed version of the parts that I really loved in Blackwater Sister. This author, I believe, was born and raised in Malaysia, and her stories these stories take place in Malaysia. Blackwater Sister takes place in Malaysia. I've been to Malaysia, but I'm certainly not an expert on Malaysia because I've only been there one time. I will say that a lot of her description of Malaysia really reflected what I remember from the time that I spent there. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just something that, like, the way she describes it, I have an easy time visualizing in my mind. It could be because she's excellent at the visualization element in her writing, but it could also be because I've been there, so like I kind of get an idea of a lot of what she's referring to as far as environmentally. I also really love that the way I feel she gets you to know her characters is through their dialogue, not just writing paragraphs about what characters look like or what they do, but she has her characters talk a lot, like talk to each other, and you learn so much of who the characters are just by the way they speak and what they say. It really, in Blackwater Sister and in these short stories, it really makes me feel like when I'm reading Zen Cho's writing, I feel like I'm a fly on the wall, just observing the things that are being said or happening, rather than sitting reading a book and an author is like telling me what's going on. With her books, they make me feel really immersive, which I really love. I love when an author makes like my mental visualization of what's going on in the story easier, and I can confidently say that Zen Cho does that even in these short stories. Like, you know, with a short story, you don't have a lot of room. I feel like most of these stories are probably about 20 pages long or so it's not like these super long short stories. You know, they are indeed short stories, but she does such a good job at getting you into what is going on in each one, which I think for any author, I think being able to draw on a reader is like a really impressive skill. Whenever I encounter an author that can like bring me into the story and make me feel like I'm there and like I know exactly what's going on and who these characters are, I have to recognize that you have such an incredible skill, and I feel like Zen Cho absolutely has that skill. Overall, I'm extremely happy with this book. I believe I said it already, but I'll say it again. This is a 5-star book for me. It was absolutely everything that I was hoping it would be, and I will have to double check. I'm not sure if this author has another book of short stories like this. God, I wish that she did. I hope that she does. If she doesn't, I hope that she will write another one. This was so enjoyable. If you enjoyed Blackwater Sister, I think you're gonna really like Spirits Abroad. If you haven't read Blackwater Sister, well, you're missing out. You probably should. But like this one, for me personally, is even better. As a person, I don't normally gravitate to short stories, so I'm a little like, I'm pleasantly surprised how much I loved this, but man, I loved this book. If anyone knows of another author doing stories like this, please let me know. This was like right up my alley. I loved the mythology and like the immersion into the stories. Someone let me know because I need more books like this in my life, 100%. My second summer reading book is now complete. I am so glad that I chose this one to be one of the final 3 that I go with to finish up that summer reading. And even if Zen Cho, I know she's got several other books, even if they're not like this, I find that I like her so much as a writer. I definitely have plans to check her other books out too. The City of Brass, my third and final summer reading book, and I have to say, I think I saved the best for last. This was such an enjoyable book to read. It sucked me in. I think I finished it in 3 days because I just didn't want to put it down. And this is like over 500 pages. I had other stuff going on, and still I was like, you know what? I've got to just sit here and finish this book. One of the things that I really liked the most about The City of Brass was the visualization. I thought the author did a really great job in describing the environments, describing the cultures that we're surrounded by. And I mean, you're going into like a djinn city and a djinn society, and it should be a little bit magical, a little bit mystical, a little bit mythological, right? I feel like this author did a great job in putting you into like a magical desert environment, so it was a good mashup of like mystical and fantasy, but also knowing that it's based in our world as well. I love that she made our real world history part of the history in this book, like the history of the djinn. I thought it was so well done, the way that she just wove that all together. It makes it feel, you know, more believable, even though this is a full-on fantasy book, make no mistake. Like, if you like the idea of djinn, but you want something a little bit different than just like seeing the djinn and master relationship focused on, I think this is going to be a book that you're looking for. We did get to see scenes of a djinn and master relationship in the context of this universe to kind of understand what that is, but that was definitely not the focus point of this book. There was very little of that. This was purely focused on what is a djinn society like? Where do the djinn come from? Where do they exist? What do they have going on when they're not just like existing in a lamp waiting for someone to summon them to make wishes, right? In the author's world that she's created, not all djinn are slaves, so they don't have masters that they have to do wish granting. We're purely focused on djinn society and what that entails, and it felt like a full immersion because, like, combined with all of the descriptions the author was able to do, I felt like I was going through the djinn city and seeing the different like tribes, the quarters of the city for the different tribes of djinn, and how they interact with each other, how they're different, the different powers that they have, and a little bit of djinn politics too, which I have to say, not so different from like human-based politics in fantasy books. I think the author did a good job at exploring the diversity of the djinn and with the primary characters in this, because we're following Nari, who's our main character. She's a girl who was raised outside of djinn society. Our main character grew up on the streets of Cairo, just like around normal humans. And one day when she's about 20, like some wild stuff starts happening, and she kind of finds herself ultimately in the main like djinn capital city of Daevabad. On her way to the djinn capital city, she's accompanied by an actual djinn. This is the first time she's met a djinn in her life, so he's one of the main characters. I really liked him too, Dara. He was pretty excellent, I think, as a djinn. While this journey is happening and she's traveling to get to Daevabad, we also alternate in some chapters. We go to Ali, who's actually a djinn prince in the city of Daevabad. So we're seeing what's going on with him at the same time as Nari, our main character, is making her way to the city. We kind of get an introduction through his perspective to some of the issues that are going on in djinn society. Like, not everything is just a utopia there. They do have some problems that are pretty big social issues that the djinn, like the different djinn groups, don't agree on how to handle them. Once Nari shows up to the city, like everyone meets, so the storyline becomes like connected at that point with everyone coming together. I won't give any spoilers on the plot any further than that. Just know the bulk of this story takes place in Daevabad as you see all these characters kind of trying to get to know each other, figure each other out, deal with these pressing social issues that are happening in Daevabad. And Nari, who of course grew up in Cairo, now adjusting to being in a city that's not a human city, it's a city of djinn. So I felt like the pacing in this was a little bit slow until you get to like the last act, but I didn't actually mind that. I felt like we were taking our time. The author wanted to build a picture for you of the world that she was working with our characters. I really didn't mind the slow pacing of the story. I feel like it served a purpose because it gave me more time to feel like I could immerse myself into the story, into the environment, get a better idea of like the characters, who they are. And then the last act, like the pace picked up things got crazy real quick, and clearly like she was setting it up for the sequel, which this is a trilogy. Then I think there's also a fourth book that's somehow related. And then of course she wrote another book, The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, which I believe is also related somehow, but we aren't there yet. We're only on book number 1, so I can't worry about those yet. But for sure, I am absolutely going to finish reading the Daevabad trilogy. I wasn't actually planning on picking up the next book in the trilogy so fast, but like this ended on a huge cliffhanger for like every character, and I have to know what happens. I cannot wait. I do not do well with cliffhangers. That's why like I wait until the entire season of a show has finished airing before I watch it, because I don't even want to wait a week to figure out what happens next. So I will be grabbing the second book in the trilogy, which I believe is The Kingdom of Copper, and I'm gonna be trying to read that relatively quickly. I do have a lot of other things on my TBR right now, but I gotta find out what happens. Like, I cannot wait. This was a 4-star book. I think if you want a fantasy story with jinn or Middle Eastern mythology or setting, anything like that, give this one a try. It's a little bit slow as it builds, but if I would say try to sit back and enjoy the ride as the author paints a picture for you of the environment that she's throwing you into, because that was a big draw of this book, was the environment and the mythology, and our main character is thrown into this city of jinn, and she's not entirely sure how to process it. With that, I am done with my summer reading, so I'm somewhat accomplished. I finished those 3 books that I set out to do, better late than never, and I enjoyed all of them, so that was awesome. Even though I rated Spirits Abroad higher, like I rated that 5 stars, I have to say that I think maybe The City of Brass was overall more fun to read. I had 3 enjoyable books in my summer reading, so I'm taking it as a win. You can see I've got some of my fall and Halloween stuff behind me, so it is time to move into the next stage of reading. Spooky season is upon us, so I got this done just in the nick of time. Have you read any of the books that I finished up for my summer reading? Let me know what your thoughts are if you have, or if you plan to pick any of them up. Let me know if you read any books that you really liked this summer too. If you had like some summer mood reading that you finally got done and you're excited about it. You know I'm always on the lookout for more books to add to my TBR. That's all that I've got for you today. Thank you so much for coming by. I always appreciate it. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content like this. I'll see you next time. Thanks.